Part of the story of reasonableness is being able to contain strong feeling. Let's break that down a little bit. Everybody has a sense of what is considered, it's hard to use the word reasonable, but common, acceptable, proportionate intensity of a feeling. So let's say, for example, if somebody misses a bus or something in the house unfortunately breaks. So most people on a scale of 0 to 100 are not such well-developed holy people that they take everything that happens to them as simply the Ratzon Hashem, and with great emunah and bitachon, they don't get worked up about it at all. I'm not even sure that would be healthy, by the way, because a little bit of the feeling that we're supposed to have is what really gives us a chance to relate to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So I'm not even sure that it would be healthy, and certainly Rabbi Yisrael Salanter said that we're not supposed to be stoned. So the glass broke. Missed the bus, whatever example you want to give. So if we feel on a 0 to 100, we feel somewhere like a 5 or a 10. I think that most people would probably say that that's okay. That's appropriate to what happened. If you met somebody who was carrying on about that small mishap, was carrying on about it at 70 or 80, you would know that something is off. Something's wrong. And if you said to the person who might be in the mirror, might not be another person, might be myself, what are you getting that worked up about? And if the response comes, what? It's a nothing? It's a nothing? The answer would be no, not a nothing. So I'm upset. You would be upset also. Say, yeah, but somewhere between 10 and 70 lies unreasonableness, lies an intensity that does not belong with this event. That intensity is about you have to deal with, and again, the you very well need, maybe the person in the mirror, you need to deal and contain this intensity, because the numbers between 10 and 70 are not about the mishap. They're about stuff that's going on inside that needs to be dealt with so that you can become a more reasonable person. Because high numbers will always cause unreasonableness. That's part of their definition. So we're not saying that things are a 0, but we're also saying that things are not a 70 or an 80. And by contrast, we're supposed to elicit feelings, for example, at a simcha. We're supposed to push the numbers up by thinking about the joy that is being experienced by a chassan and a kal. We're supposed to up the numbers to think about the loss of a good person at a levaya. We're supposed to get the numbers higher when the situation calls for the higher numbers. So higher numbers don't always mean unreasonableness. They mean unreasonableness when they are out of our control, when we're not able to contain them. When we're not able to contain them, such as a child who screams because somebody took away their ball. And lo and behold, you find that same person 60 years later is still screaming the same way because somebody took away their ball. And that's because they have not recognized that on a 0 to 100, the 5s, the 7s, maybe even sometimes the 10s, are certainly part of the human condition, something that we should use in our relationship with Hashem. Chazal tell us that if a person puts his hand in his pocket and wants to bring out the change from the pocket, the wrong change comes up, he's supposed to know that that's Hashem cleaning up his account, that's Hashem bringing him Yisurim, and relate to it appropriately. But if if the numbers start going so high, that's a signal of unreasonableness. So when we intentionally raise the numbers, because it helps us grow, because it's a good thing to mourn and to grieve over a good person, it's a good thing to rejoice by the simcha. So then we are actually using intense emotions to grow closer to Hashem. But when the numbers fly up and they are not contained, then those intense emotions take us away from Hashem. As you will notice, that somebody who is in that kind of tantrum cannot relate appropriately to Hashem. They start blaming, they start screaming, they start carrying on. They can't use the event, which might be indeed a disappointment, something that they needed to go through in order to have maybe a wake-up call or whatever the need is. But once the numbers fly up in the tantrum, they can't use it anymore. It doesn't serve the purpose of coming closer to Hashem. Now, there are some times when we give the person a pass. The person has lost a loved one, so initially we give the person a pass. It's not always, and it's certainly not to 100. That's not appropriate. But we give a certain amount of a pass because we're allowing for the fact that there is a certain amount of unreasonableness that is built into the situation. And by the way, when that's going on, we don't call on the person to paskin. We don't call on the person to make appropriate and reasoned decisions because we don't expect them to, because the numbers are understandably high. So high numbers does not always mean unreasonableness, but it often is a signal that there's some unreasonableness going on. And when it comes to negative emotions, the goal is to lower the numbers as much as possible. With all midos, the Rambam says that there's a balance. Not too much, not too little, something around the middle, except for anger. Anger, says the Rambam, the goal is reducing it to 0. So we consider any amount of anger to be a cause for unreasonableness. With that said, the Mishnah says that if somebody breaks their word and it costs a person money because the other person broke their word. So the Mishnah says, Ein lo alav ela ta'aromis. He has a complaint. He's allowed to feel a certain bitterness. Says Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, look what the Mishnah is saying. The Mishnah is saying that in order to feel a little bit of bitterness, you need a heter from the Mishnah. This is a case where you're allowed to have a certain amount of negative feeling. That means that everywhere else, it's not a carte blanche. We don't just give the person a pass, because after all, they suffered a loss. And so one of the keys to understanding what reasonableness is and how we can find it and how we can acquire it is by checking the level or intensity of an emotion to see if that intensity is useful for bringing me closer to Hashem, or if it's out of control, such that it's distancing me from Hashem. Maybe that it's out of control too high, or maybe it's out of control too low. And so reasonableness can't be said, well, the only people who are reasonable are the ones who have very low numbers. That's not always true. But numbers, as it is associated with emotions, is a window into reasonableness. And it's one that we need to take into account and say, when I'm asking the question, am I being unreasonable? One of the things that I need to be checking is, are my emotions, am I using them to come closer to Hashem? Or am I always just giving myself a pass and saying, but it's horrible, but it's such a bad thing. Anybody would be upset if this happened to them. And the answer is, well, that's kind of true that anybody would be upset, but being upset at 10 and being upset at 70 is not the same story. And so on the road towards reasonableness, you will find emotions that are both contained, and when they are elevated, it's because there was a choice to elevate them. And when they are reduced, it's because we chose to reduce them in the interests of bitachon, in the interests of fair play, in the interests of serving Hashem, in the interests of being socially appropriate. We choose to lower those numbers in order to be balanced. Doesn't mean that low numbers is always the right way to go. It means that numbers associated with emotions, intensity we call it, associated with emotions is a window, and it's a window through which we need to look to find reasonableness.